Hello. So, one of the things teams always run into in working to do agile, and it takes a lot of practice, is you've created these stories. These stories represent your product features, your ideas, and often these ideas are too big to fit within your iteration, so your sprint that you're trying to get things done in. And in particular, this really hits student teams because this is not your full-time job. You need to get work done on the project. It needs to fit within this 2-week period from sprint planning to sprint review, which all happens inside of 2 weeks. So your actual amount of time to actually design, implement, test all your code and all those things is actually less than 2 weeks. So one of the problems is coming up with the right sized stories, and we work on stories and we try to get them developed and deployed all within one sprint. So if they're too big, we lose track of things. We don't make a sense of progress. One of the really important things is to be able to break up work into manageable sizes that we can track, and we can really get a sense of, are we getting things done? Are we making progress? Because if we get it through the various stages from our design, implementation to code and review, and then it's delivered to the customer, we know we're making real progress. If we don't do that, we're just kind of working and we don't really have a sense of what our progress is. So time and time again, we have to work really hard to break our stories up so that we can deliver them in an incremental fashion. So a guideline that we'll use is that if you can't design it, implement it, get it all reviewed and fixed up and actually deployed to the customer, not deployed on your own personal setup, but deployed somewhere where this is, that's where the customer always goes to see the working product. Within 1 week, your story is too big, okay? And this really, should put into your mind, well, wait a minute. What does that mean? Oh, a week sounds like a ton of time. Remember, you got these other courses you're going to work on, so you don't have tons of time in every day to devote to this course. You do have fairly large teams. You've got these 2 pizza teams, but it doesn't necessarily mean that work speeds along at light speed. So let's think about this. Let's put this into context. There is a classic rule of thirds. Traditionally, it's about upfront planning, coding, and then maybe testing and delivering. And I'm going to modify the rule of thirds here for us to sort of understand things. And I think it's basically the same, though, which is whenever we work on a story, yes, we will have done some upfront lo-fi mock-ups. We will have done a lot of talking. We will have started to develop our concepts of it and our design of it, but our design won't be done. Okay, and so we always, at the start of working on a story, we go back to our design, and we know we want to build this thing now. So let's really flesh out our design to be sure that we all know what it is that we're trying to build, and perhaps even quickly show it to the customer, because you can get feedback because you're going to work closely with the customer. But that's about 1/3 of the time that it's going to take you. So whatever the total time is until you get it all done, about 1/3 of it up front is trying to figure out, again, what it is exactly that you plan to build. And design, that's, again, these are the mock-ups. You're going to work to really enumerate out what are the acceptance criteria. What is the customer going to expect this to do? What if it does this, will the customer accept the code, basically? What is the user acceptance criteria? This is also where you're going to draw your ERD diagrams. You may not have gotten around to that level of design yet, and so now's the time you start to draw them. Same thing you're going to go, oh, I'm going to need these classes. The obvious ones in a web app, you're going to be talking about what are the models, what are the controllers, what are the views, okay? But you might have other classes and other helper methods and things that you think are going to be necessary, and you start to plan these out and talk about it with the other people on the team. All right, great. You think you know what it is you're going to build and how it is you think you know you're going to figure out how to build it. Well, now you sit down, now that you've done that and you've got a good idea, you sit down and you actually work on writing your code and your tests. Okay, so these are together, your tests. If you don't have automated tests, you're going to be coming up with what are the manual tests and documenting them. If you're automating them, you're going to be writing the code for them. Great. But only about a third of your time is that. So look, if you're supposed to be hitting this in a week, and let's round your week down to 6 days. Let's say you're going to take 1 day off, okay? That means in 2 days, you've got all the code and testing done for this story. And that's 2 school days. That's not, I'm working nonstop for 2 days. It's 2 school days. That should give you a sense that this has to be a pretty compact, pretty small story. And then, all right, great, we've got it all coded. We write up our pull request. It's all detailed and documented. We submit it. We ask for it to be reviewed. Someone gets around, they review it. They run our tests and all that stuff. They ask for some changes. We make the changes. We have our back and forth. And then finally the code is approved. We merge it into the main, and then we deploy it to our working site that we're maintaining for our customer, and it's finally delivered. Okay, so don't get the sense that 1 week is a week of coding. 1 week means about 2 days of effort on the coding, because you're going to have to spend time figuring out what it is you're going to actually do, and you're going to have to spend time to making sure that you've actually done it well. Okay, so this is a really fairly small nugget. And that being said, what we would really like to see is that of the stories that you do, you really should have a sense that your goal would be that 50% of stories take at most 3 days. So what does that mean? That means 1 day, we sit down, we figure out what it's going to do. We do our design work. 1 day, get the thing coded and tests. 1 day, we review it, we get it out, and we deliver it. Boom, 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 okay? So of the stories that the team is going to produce within an iteration, within a sprint, about half of them should be these really, really fast, yep, we figured it out, we built it, we tested it, it's done. And the really nice thing about that is because you're going to work in these really small chunks, your work stays really manageable. You keep your stress level down, and team members feel like, yeah, I can take that on. It's only going to be like one night, one evening worth of coding or whatever. I'm going to put in my time. We're going to get it done. Oh yeah, well, of course I had to design and we had to do the review and everything, but it goes really fast. So you want to strive that most of your stories, basically at least half of them, from start to it's out there to the customer, 3 days. These basic guidelines, by the way, of 1 week and 3 days and 50%, these come from the Berkeley offering, just to give credit to them. I think they're really good guidelines, and they really do match up with what I have seen in the previous four years or so of this course, MSci 342. People need small, tiny little stories to actually produce output on a fast basis. So let's give you some examples of how do you break up these stories. Okay, so absolutely one of the, you know all about CRUD. Okay, so you've got to be able to create, to read, to update, destroy, delete. All right, so basically, you could basically say, yeah, I'm going to write a story, and maybe even, you got to have the create, I guess, but you could break it up so that you do create and read, so that you can make something and see it, but you know what? I'm done. We were able to create it, read it, that's it. You might even start with reading if you have some existing data and you just don't provide a user interface for creating. Oh yeah, we'll show you what's in the table. There you go. Nice and easy. The next story, oh yeah, we'll let you add things to the table. All right. And then maybe you go ahead and you work on deleting things. Well, I'll let you delete things. And then finally update, which always tends to be tricky, and so forth. But another thing to keep in mind is that both create and update tend to be tricky, partly because we have to, we have to make sure that we write all these various validations and things to make sure that the data is correct before it goes into the database. Maybe version 1 is without validations and error checking and stuff. It's just, yeah, I'll let you put anything in that database as long as the database allows it, because of course you would design your database to protect it for certain things. But sure, version 1 is about that, and that could be a story. That's a simple version of the story. And then version 2 is with validations and error checking. My next version of the story that we get in there, we make sure that we validate all the data correctly, and we're only going to do what's allowed. Why split it up again? Because it can be easier to work that way. It's a lot more work to get all the validations and everything working. No, you split the work up. The idea is that it would still be useful to the client to be able to create things, but they're likely to make mistakes, and we should be doing these validations. But, it's still of value, okay? So you can break stories up that way. A lot of projects in the past in 342, some clients have wanted various data to be analyzed and to displayed, sort of a data analytics and things. And you can think of, and the students usually come up with great ideas about these beautiful graphs and these beautiful charts. But that's a lot of work. Those are big stories. But you could basically start with numbers. Hey, I'll just tell you the average and the standard deviation, or I'll tell you the median. I'll give you descriptive statistics. Then you could move on to fancy charts and graphs and things like that. But you could have an initial small story to get started. Okay, yeah, we had to be able to process over the data and compute some statistics. That was great. That was story number 1. Oh, story number 2, yeah. We'll first turn this statistic into a plot. We'll plot it for you. Oh, okay, great. And maybe the third version is, we'll give you some interactive control over that. We'll let you change things in the display and filter the data or whatever, It doesn't all have to be the final product, the final vision doesn't all have to happen at once. We want to get there incrementally, bit by bit, and we want to do that so that we can continually get feedback from the customer as we do it. We want to deliver value quickly so that we can get the feedback quickly and really know what it is that we should be focusing our attention on as we go into the next iteration, the next sprint. So making our stories small is a really big and important part of that. Often, we are implementing and helping people with workflows. Oh, we do this and we do that and we do this and we do that. And then you get this huge long workflow that you've got to build into your application. And you're just like, geez, that's really hard. So one thing to do is, of course, we could break some stories up by pieces of the workflow. But you know what? Often, you can basically usually say, you're going to, as a team, focus on improve one part of the workflow. So you're not even going to build anything else. You're going to plug in to the existing flow, okay? So there could be in the existing workflow in the organization, we produce this file and this file and this file. Well, you could insert yourself and say, we'll read in that file and we'll write out the file for the next part of the workflow. And then once you've done this, so this one part of the workflow, then you can even focus on break it up, okay, into smaller stories so that you can, within your iteration, break up the work and deliver things and figure out a way. But trying to often deal with full workflows is a gigantic amount of work, and you sometimes focus yourself on the most important thing to improve for the client. break it up, work on improving it. And when you've replaced that part of their workflow, they're going to be really happy because that's cool. And then you can start tackling some of the other pieces of the workflow. You don't always have to build out the full workflow to get something out to the customer. Now, I keep talking about here that we want things that the customer can actually use. When we talk about Scrum, we'll talk about this a bit more, but our goal for every single sprint in Scrum is that at the end of the sprint, we have working software that the client finds of value and of use, and that they can give us feedback on. We don't show them partially implemented pieces of software that have no value because it's just not all there. We aim for to get as fast as possible in our project to something that's of use to the customer, and then we work to improve it on the next sprint and the next sprint and the next sprint. All right. We don't want to slowly build something that by the end of 4 sprints, then they can finally use. That's usually a recipe for disaster, and that's not agile. That's just simply giving status reports every sprint. Oh, yeah, we're making progress, we're making progress. Scrum is about delivering value at the end of each sprint, working usable software that the client can give us feedback on, that then we can add new features and improve things. So it's like when I was talking about with the create, read, update, and delete. Oh, the first version, maybe it doesn't have all the validations, or maybe we can't actually update things. We can just add them and delete them. So if you make a mistake, you're going to have to delete it and add a new thing to replace it. We just don't give you any editing capabilities. Oh, that's a bummer. Yeah, but it's usable and we got it done. Next week, we'll add in the ability to edit things. All right, some of the other ideas and things and way to break things apart. You can look at the data that you're using, okay? So maybe you make the feature work with the easy data first. And so there you know that there's 80% of the data is like this. It'll work with this data, but it won't work with the remaining 20%. That might upset the customer, but it is one way to get going and to break it up. And then you deal with the complex data or the outliers next. We know occasionally there's going to be strange data. Initially, we just reject it here. Oh no, in the next version, we'll actually deal with it in a more sophisticated manner. The other thing I often see is in the design is single use versus reuse. So as an example, often, so a lot of clients that we have for this course, we'll have course instructors or other people at the university, and everything at the university largely goes term by term by term. And the vision usually is, oh, you're going to give me some piece of software and it's going to run forever, and I'll break up the work internally by term. All right, so this term I had these courses, and the next term, and then you'll keep a history of all of it, and won't that be great? Well, you know what? You can basically be like, well, we're actually going to design things at the start to only handle 1 term's worth, and basically you require a reset or a new deploy for the next term. Why? Because it's hard to deal with multiple terms and build a bigger app. But we'll just have to have it work for 1 term, and then you'd start it fresh again. That's a lot easier to build. And so you can even at the high level of design for your product, really sort of try to push away some complexity and save it for the future. Multiple terms would be handled in the next version. Instead of saying from the beginning you're going to handle it. So we were always looking at ways to sort of build something simpler first and then add to it. And the way we get there, though, is we've got these stories. We know what this functionality is that we want, but if you can't deliver that story in 1 week, design it, code it, test it, implement, review and deliver it in 1 week, it's too big. And you've got to think about, how can I break it up into smaller stories that can be delivered in these tiny little chunks and keep in mind, you really want to get down to, oh yeah, in 3 days, we've got it out. We designed it in a day. We coded and tested in a day. We reviewed it, made sure it worked, shipped it. All right. And we do this by breaking up our stories. In Learn, you'll see we have a link to a chapter in a book about breaking up stories, and that gives you a lot more discussion to read about that and to get other ideas about how to break up stories. All right.